Minister, I think you're here. Okay, please. Please. Good morning, and welcome to the Geopolitical Outlook session here at the 2022 World Economic Forum annual meeting here in Davos, Switzerland. I'm Mirek Dušek. I'm with the World Economic Forum. For years now, analysts and leaders have been concerned about increased competition and fractures in the tissue of international relations as we've known them, particularly since the 1990s. They have been concerned about the growing divergence, the strategic divergence among the great powers. They have been concerned about the resulting multipolarity and then the attendant lack of progress in some of the key global issues that we have: climate change, trade, technology, governance, health. And many have also been warning about the risk this increasingly fragile system poses not only on the geopolitical front, but also across economies and societies. If anyone needed any persuading, Russia's invasion of Ukraine 3 months ago on this day is a testament that we've entered a more geopolitical world. It is also a vivid testament that we're facing a very systemic challenge, because we're facing a geopolitical crisis which is having these cascading effects across energy systems, food systems, and also within the global economy. We've been talking about it here now at the annual meeting, and I think it's best summed up by the head of the IMF, who said it here yesterday, that the war in Ukraine has darkened the outlook for the global economy and could result in recession for more vulnerable countries. So to help us understand this fast evolving geopolitical landscape, but also hopefully get us a sense of where we are headed, and also how can we get things done in this more competitive landscape, I am joined here by a truly august panel of leaders. So let me introduce them in the way they're seated here. Andrzej Duda, President of Poland. Warm welcome. Pekka Haavisto, Foreign Minister of Finland. A warm welcome. His Highness Prince Faisal bin Farhan Al Saud, Foreign Minister of Saudi Arabia. Hina Rabbani Khar, Minister of State for Foreign Affairs of Pakistan. Welcome. Gregory Meeks, Congressman from New York and Chair of the House Foreign Affairs Committee. Welcome. And Jose Manuel Alvarez, Foreign Minister of Spain. Last but not least. If I could turn to you, Mr. President, first. You were in Ukraine, in Kiev, on Sunday. You delivered an in-person address to Ukraine's parliament. It was the first time a foreign head of state has done so since Russia's invasion. And you forcefully pushed back against the idea of Ukraine making any concessions to Russia. And Europe and the West has so far been very united. Are you optimistic? Are you persuaded we can remain united on that front going forward? And long-term security picture in Europe, are we headed to a new Cold War? Over to you.
Thank you very much, distinguished participants, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. I'm very optimistic because I'm here again after 2 years of pandemic, so I'm in general optimistic. Thank you very much for this kind invitation and this possibility to be here and to participate in this panel, to have this opportunity to share with you my point of view, my opinions concerning situation in Ukraine now, in our part of the world, in our part of Europe, and my opinion, how it could influence the situation for the future. So now, please take your earphones and electronic devices because it will be much easier for me to tell it in my mother tongue, in Polish. I have excellent interpreter, Madam Aneta Wiśniewska-Sołtykiewicz in the cabin, so she will translate it perfectly. So thank you for coming and thank you for this possibility to be here to say these few words. Szanowni Państwo, tak rzeczywiście powróciłem z Kijowa dosłownie wczoraj nad ranem. Miałem tą wielką przyjemność, że pan prezydent Wołodymyr Zełenski, z którym mogę śmiało powiedzieć, jestem faktycznie zaprzyjaźniony, jako sąsiadem naszym, zaprosił mnie wraz z przewodniczącym Dumy Państwowej, Rady Najwyższej do tego, aby przed Radą Najwyższą wystąpić, co przyjąłem jako wielki zaszczyt w imieniu Rzeczypospolitej Polskiej. W trudnej bardzo dla Ukrainy sytuacji, w jakiej znalazła się 3 miesiące temu w związku z rosyjską napaścią, która jeszcze 2 lata temu była nie do pomyślenia, która w ostatnich miesiącach była, powiedzmy sobie, spodziewana, ale mimo wszystko muszę Państwu powiedzieć, że mimo różnych doniesień oczywiście ze strony, rzecz jasna, jak wszyscy wiedzą, wywiadów, które mieliśmy i które ja miałem możliwość czytać jako prezydent Rzeczypospolitej, ja mimo wszystko aż takiej skali napaści się nie spodziewałem. Muszę powiedzieć, że wiedziałem, że napaść rosyjska nastąpi, to było jasne. Prezydent Putin nie miał już wyjścia, skoro zebrał tak wielkie wojska przy ukraińskiej granicy. No, musiał tą sytuację jakoś rozwiązać, także ze względów prestiżowych dla siebie, to było jasne, propagandowych. Ta napaść musiała nastąpić, ale przyznaję się Państwu, że spodziewałem się napaści o znacznie mniejszej skali. Myślałem, że może moja pierwsza myśl była, że to będzie tylko atak na rejon Doniecka i Ługańska. Potem myślałem, że może będzie chciał uzyskać korytarz na Krym. W trzeciej wersji widziałem dopiero, że może częścią tego będzie jeszcze napaść na Odessę i Kijów. Na Odessę i Kijów, choć nie bardzo mi się chciało wierzyć w to, że to byłoby możliwe w ogóle, żeby zdecydował się na aż tak daleko idącą, poważną, potężną operację militarną, ale uważałem, że jest to możliwe z 2 względów. Po pierwsze, Kijów stanowi historyczną stolicę Rusi. Kijów jest historyczną kolebką Rusi. W Kijowie Ruś została ochrzczona, to jest początek Rosji jako takiej. Tak Rosjanie to traktują, w związku z czym zdobycie Kijowa byłoby uzyskaniem no właśnie tej kolebki, tego gniazda rosyjskiej cywilizacji i rosyjskiej kultury. A więc to jest ważne. Natomiast Odessa to jest symbol wielkości Rosji. Dla Rosjan Odessa to wielka, wspaniała perła carskiej Rosji, jej okno na świat, wielokulturowe, wspaniałe, cieknące bogactwem w czasach carskich, będące synonimem luksusu i nowoczesności. W związku z powyższym, jeżeli mówimy, że odżyły tendencje imperialne u Władimira Putina i jego otoczenia, aby tą imperialną Rosję odbudowywać, to w ogromnym stopniu nie są to tylko jakieś tam marzenia i powroty mentalne do Związku Sowieckiego, w którym oni się urodzili i wychowali, w którym żyli jako agentura KGB, jako oficerowie KGB, ale to jest także dzisiaj myślenie o wielkiej carskiej Rosji, która była potęgą ówczesnego świata w XIX i na samym początku XX wieku. I w związku z tym, no ale widziałem to jako taki scenariusz trzeci. 4. scenariusz obejmował absolutnie pełnoskalową inwazję na całe terytorium Ukrainy, ale nie podejrzewałem w ogóle, żeby taka inwazja była możliwa z bardzo prostego względu. Szanowni Państwo, Ukraina jest 2 razy większa od mojego kraju, od Polski. Polska ma 312 000 km², Ukraina ponad 620 000 km², więc no, do tego trzeba armii, żeby okupować całą Ukrainę, a Putin zgromadził szacowano między 160 a 190 tysięcy żołnierzy, więc okupacja całej Ukrainy po prostu była niemożliwa. Natomiast była jedna rzecz, której wydaje mi się, że mimo wszystko prezydent Putin nie wziął pod uwagę, a mianowicie nie wziął pod uwagę tego, że Ukraińcy będą w tak zdecydowany sposób się bronili. To Władimir Zełenski zapewniał mnie o tym kilkakrotnie, bo spotykaliśmy się 2-krotnie przed samą inwazją. Raz to była wizyta u mnie w Polsce, kiedy zupełnie nieformalnie odwiedził mnie w Wiśle ze swoimi współpracownikami. Mieliśmy możliwość długiej rozmowy, a potem dzień przed inwazją, już dosłownie niemalże tuż przed rosyjskimi czołgami, rozmawialiśmy po raz ostatni w Kijowie, kiedy byłem tam z prezydentem Gitanasem Nausedą. Dosłownie kilka godzin przed rosyjską inwazją. Za każdym razem Wołodymyr mówił: Andrzej, jeżeli oni myślą, że oni zdobędą Ukrainę, tak ją po prostu podbiją, przyjdą i zajmą naszą ziemię, a my ją oddamy, to są w głębokim błędzie. My walczymy od 8 lat, od 2014 roku. My mamy tysiące ludzi, którzy widzieli krew, walczyli, byli w boju, których przyjaciele ginęli i tu będzie walka na śmierć i życie. Tutaj nikt piędzi ziemi nie odda bez krwi. No i tak się stało. I tak się dzisiaj dzieje. Proszę Państwa, co jest 100% dla mnie pewne, a mianowicie Ukraińcy bronią się wszelkimi siłami i będą się bronili. Tam nie ma wielkiej nadziei w moim przekonaniu na pokój, który będzie polegał na tym, że Europa Zachodnia zmusi Ukraińców do tego, żeby oddali swoją ziemię Putinowi i zgodzili się na jego warunki. Ukraińcy się po prostu na to nie zgodzą. Z wielu względów się nie zgodzą. Nie zgodzą się dlatego, że przelali już morze krwi. Nie zgodzą się dlatego, że walczyli, Rosjanie zniszczyli ich kraj. I sama chęć wzięcia odwetu i odzyskania swojego jest tak potężnie silna w nich, że ja nie wierzę w to, żeby zgodzili się na warunki pokojowe, które będą polegały na tym, że Rosjanie zabiorą kolejne kilometry kwadratowe ziemi ukraińskiej. Po prostu nie wierzę w to, żeby się zgodzili na to również ze względów politycznych. Dzisiejsza klasa polityczna na Ukrainie nie może się na to zgodzić. Każdy, kto się na to zgodzi dzisiaj, będąc politykiem na Ukrainie, jest po prostu skończony, bo ta obrona jest decyzją ogólnonarodową. To nie jest tak, że część narodu uważa, żeby się nie bronić, że lepiej będzie, jak tu będzie Rosja. Tam prawie nikt nie uważa, tak? W związku z powyższym, jeżeli ktoś liczy z polityków na Zachodzie, że zmusi dzisiaj Ukraińców do tego, żeby ustąpili przed Putinem, tak jak to niedawno słychać było ze strony pana Berlusconiego, no to jest w głębokim błędzie. I ja tutaj nie ukrywam, że będę absolutnie jako prezydent Polski Ukrainę w 100% wspierał. Dlaczego? Z bardzo prostej również przyczyny. Pomijając wszystkie inne aspekty, proszę Państwa, ja się nie mogę zgodzić jako także sąsiad Rosji na to, by Rosja bezkarnie naruszała reguły prawa międzynarodowego, po raz kolejny łamała, a świat na to przystawał. Ja się nie mogę godzić na to, żeby Rosja mordowała ludzi na Ukrainie, a świat udawał, że tego nie widzi. Żeby nie zostały wyciągnięte konsekwencje wobec morderców. Żeby Rosja nie zapłaciła reparacji wojennych za straty, które spowodowała na Ukrainie, żeby jej nie zmusić do tego, żeby po prostu sfinansowała odbudowę Ukrainy. Dla mnie jest sprawą oczywistą, że ci, którzy rozpętali wojnę na Ukrainie, napadając niesprawiedliwie, bez żadnego uzasadnienia Ukrainę, bo proszę mi wierzyć, nie ma cienia prawdy w rosyjskiej propagandzie o jakichś tam nazistach na Ukrainie i tego typu kwestiach. To jest w ogóle kompletna bzdura. To była kompletnie inwazja wynikająca wyłącznie z imperialnych ambicji Rosji, z niczego więcej. Tam nikt na Rosję nie czekał, aż ona tam przyjdzie. Ludzie chcieli żyć na Ukrainie wolnej, niepodległej, suwerennej. Dzisiaj się im ją zabiera. W związku z powyższym świat dzisiaj musi stanąć twardo i ta wojna powinna się zakończyć poprzez to, że Rosja odda Ukrainie tereny, które zagrabiła, zapłaci kontrybucję, a zbrodniarze zostaną ukarani. To jest mój punkt widzenia na to, jak to powinno się zakończyć. Więc apeluję do wszystkich, aby wspierać dzisiaj Ukrainę. Apeluję do wszystkich, aby stać twardo po stronie Ukrainy, bo po jej stronie jest sprawiedliwość i uczciwość. Nie mam co do tego żadnych wątpliwości. I dzisiaj Ukraina wymaga wszechstronnego wsparcia, zarówno jeżeli chodzi o wsparcie od strony pomocy militarnej, wsparcie od strony politycznej, a także już dzisiaj organizowanie funduszy, by Ukraina mogła się odbudować i wrócić do normalnego funkcjonowania.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mr. President. Thank you so much for this important message. I'll move to Foreign Minister of Finland, Pekka Haavisto. You recently applied, together with Sweden, to become members of NATO. You have a long border with Russia. So how does the tragic war in Ukraine looks from the vantage point of Finland? And also, what do you expect from the NATO membership in terms of increased security for Finland? Over to you.
Thank you. And thank you for this opportunity of being here and thanking also Poland and President for all the work you have done for Ukraine. And you have been on the front line and been on the front line also on the European Union support to Ukraine. So thank you. Thank you for all that. From our perspective, we really delivered our application together with Sweden 1 week ago to NATO. Of course, now we test the NATO open door policy if it exists. I hope that the result is positive. Majority of the countries, of course, in NATO have responded very positively. But how we see actually the situation, we have really more than 1,300 kilometer common border with Russia, and actually I would maybe say that we saw 5 changes in our surrounding and which triggered then our application to NATO. And first is actually the collapse of the European security architecture. What was agreed in Helsinki in 1975 in the OSCE structures is now disappeared. We couldn't prevent a war in Europe with all those structures that we have been creating, and that's maybe now the first remark. My second remark is the Russian ability to take higher risks. When people ask why didn't we react 2008 with Georgia, why didn't we react 2014 with the Crimea occupation, we see a totally different risk-taking ability of Russia, ready to take victims, ready to take losing materials, acting in a very unpredictable way. Russia was also able to gather more than 100,000 soldiers in one spot on their border, saying that this is an exercise, but actually using this military force then really to attack the capital, Kiev, like here was mentioned, actually to trying to do the regime change in a country of 40 million people by military force, actually even without using their reserves yet, just the ordinary military. And of course, we also have seen this kind of loose argumentation about the weapons of mass destruction. We are not, at least in Finland, used to that in Europe a country says that tactical nuclear weapons could be used at some stage, even chemical weapons could be used at some stage. This is new, and our actually ordinary people from the streets stopped the minister and asked, we have traditionally a very strong military in Finland. What do we do if we are threatened by tactical nuclear weapons? What do we do if we are threatened by chemical weapons? And that's a good question in these circumstances. And finally, what we see actually now in Ukraine is that the rules of warfare are totally lost. Geneva Conventions not respected. We see a use of sexual violence. We see a lot of use of violence against the civilians. We have been witnessing the Bucha and so forth. So we are in a totally new situation, and we have to wake up for that situation. How do we then see the NATO membership? Of course, we think that it's a group of 30 democratic countries, common values, and very strong transatlantic cooperation. And this is what we are looking for this moment. We actually felt a little bit excited that when we knew that when we are putting the application in, there will be this kind of gray time, that we are not yet members, not yet protected by Article 5, and so what will happen? But we are very thankful that many bigger countries in NATO actually delivered us this kind of not security guarantees, because you can give those only in the NATO, but security assurances, or however you want to call them, that if something bad happens, this support will be given to applicant countries, Sweden and Finland. And now we are looking, of course, forward of our NATO membership and good cooperation also on the transatlantic spirit.
Thank you. If I could just have a quick follow-up question. So on the open door policy, how optimistic you are that you can persuade Turkey to work with you in that framework?
Well, of course, we have been asked time to time that have we been too blue-eyed on NATO's open door policy. I have to say that I have been this spring twice in Turkey, talking very much with my good colleague, Minister Çavuşoğlu, and basically on those discussions, there were no problems raised and so forth. And now when we see the problems coming, of course, we take this diplomatically. We are sending our delegations to visit Ankara, actually both Sweden and Finland. This will happen tomorrow and so forth, so the dialogue is continuing. We understand that Turkey has some of their own security concerns vis-à-vis terrorism and so forth. And of course, we think that we have good answers for those, because we are also part of the fight against the terrorism. So we think that this issue can be settled. There might be also some issues that are not linked directly to Finland and Sweden, more to other NATO members and so forth, but I'm sure that in a good spirit, NATO can solve this issue. If I have been reading correctly in the NATO rules, actually this issue of common views is very strong also, that you should find consensus also in the NATO structure, and we rely on that.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. Your Highness, Foreign Minister of Saudi Arabia. So we have talked about this increased geostrategic competition, the US, China, Russia. You have a long-standing, strong partnership with the United States. You work with Russia within OPEC Plus, for example. Of course, you also have relations with China, G20 country. So what does this more competitive international system mean for a major G20 country like yours to pursue foreign policy objectives?
Thank you, and thank you for having me in this panel. You know, if we learned anything from COVID, is that we need to focus on cooperation. And I think we need to continue to look towards avenues to foster that cooperation. Even when there is difference, when there's competition, we need to find mechanisms to talk to each other. And the Kingdom having a relationship with all of the major players and playing a role in a very important part of the world, we hope that we can facilitate some of the dialogue, especially when we talk in the context of China, the US. China is our most important trading partner. The US is our most important national security partner. In the end, without cooperation, especially on issues, we are facing a significant issue on food security. Part of it is because of the war in Ukraine, but it's not just that. There are other significant factors playing into that very significantly. And here again, if we don't, as a global community within the context of the G20, beyond, are able to address those challenges, even when we have differences, I think we will be facing significant difficulties, especially in the developing world. And the Kingdom is a member of the G20, but we are also a developing country, and we feel very strongly that we have a responsibility to help set the agenda, the global agenda, in a way that supports the interests of the developing world.
Thank you. I have a follow-up question. You're also a regional actor, and so we're seeing this increased competition geostrategically. But if you look at the Middle East, you could say that you are seeing increased diplomatic activity. We've seen visits between Turkey, Saudi Arabia, UAE. We've seen you've had publicized dialogue with your northern neighbor, Iran. So are you maybe a little more hopeful that in the Middle East we can see pathways to more dialogue and cooperation?
I certainly hope so, and we are working very hard to make that happen. The Kingdom has Vision 2030, which is a very broad-ranging vision in renewing our economy, looking towards the future, building prosperity for the people of Saudi Arabia sustainably in the long term. We can only do that if we have a safe, secure region, a region that is stable, and that can only happen with cooperation with all of our neighbors. So we will continue that path of dialogue, and it reflects what I just said earlier, that our strong belief that dialogue as a whole and cooperation globally is necessary. And I think we need to make an example through fostering cooperation in our region as well.
Thank you. Moving to Minister Khar, Minister of State for Foreign Affairs of Pakistan. Similar question, again, a major power, Pakistan, in a more competitive international system. Again, huge relationship with the United States, very important relationship with China. You're a new government. Maybe you're thinking about your priorities right now on the foreign policy front. How do you navigate this as Pakistan?
Sure. Thank you. I think it's actually not an interesting, but a very difficult place to be in for all of us. It doesn't matter whether you're from Finland, from Poland, from Saudi Arabia, from Pakistan, from the United States of America or Spain. Everybody's feeling the world is an interesting place where everyone is feeling threatened by someone else. And that someone is also feeling threatened by someone, either the same person or someone else. Now, the thing that I ask myself is that when history is written and when we are told that how did humanity react and how did leadership react when both the humanity in the face of the COVID crisis or the pandemic and the hunger crisis that is on our door, when humanity was facing its biggest challenge, and when the planet, in terms of climate change, was facing perhaps the biggest challenge that it has faced, at least in my lifetime, what did the leadership of the world do? How did the world react to that? Right? And if the answer is they went to war, not a very good answer. And if the answer is they chose confrontation over collaboration, not a very good answer. Right? And then I think future generations have every right to judge the people sitting on the stage, the people in the audience, and pretty much all of us, right? So for a country like Pakistan, I don't think we should be at a place, and the fact that we are typically asked this question all the time, who do you choose, shows how far we have fallen as the global community and as the choices that we made over the last 20 years also. And there are many reasons to explain why we are where we are, and that's not a conversation that we can do in like the next 5 minutes. But it is perhaps important to understand that if we go towards a world where the two largest economies are in a state of confrontation and countries like Pakistan are asked to, given these very simplistic binary choices, are you with us, are you against us? If you're with them, then you're against us. Difficult, impossible. And now, for a country like Pakistan, which has already had fiscal space problems, to now be threatened on top of that superimposition of the food security crisis, which has resulted in, because of this particular conflict. And then every other problem that we have to deal with, both on the climate side, coming in from a difficult region, a region where we've had conflict for 20 years, just recently, and maybe 40 years before that, where the intervention in Afghanistan did not really go so well and did not give such great results. So you find yourself in this odd position of wanting to get answers from the world, but the world ending up asking you questions, right? And I will just say that in this point in time, I think this is an inflection point for the world. I genuinely am not saying this only diplomatically. I mean this is an inflection point for the world. Either we can allow confrontation to guide leadership decisions for the future, or we can do what why do most people in this room at least espouse to liberal values? And what do liberal values really mean? They mean room for other opinion to coexist and then collaborate to develop, and to each system being able to support the other and develop together, right? To have room for diversity, if not divergence, and to be able to accommodate divergence. Now, unfortunately, 20 years back, the world was a far better place. I do not feel very confident when I look at my almost teenager children and feel that I probably lived in a securer world than the one that we are leaving to them. And right now, I say we are in inflection point because I think we still have room to be able to come back, okay, and to be able to relook as to how we have. And just one thing that I'm going to sort of leave a thought with you as to, because if you look at, because often we're also asked, where are the points of alignment between, China and the US and the rest of the world? And if you speak to everyone as we do, nobody's stated position is different than the other. Everybody wants a rule-based order. Everybody wants everyone to comply with rule-based order. Everybody wants no one to offer exceptionalism. But perhaps in the way that we have conducted this whole business of cherry-picking on the rules-based order in some of the interventions, and perhaps in the way we are conducting the business of weaponizing economic tools without knowing what their impact is going to be. So we know the impact of interventions. We don't know the impact of sanctions, the way we're using them on the general, ordinary people around the world. I mean, those already have impact on Pakistani people. Did we ever think that would be possible in grain prices? So I think we're living in an exceptionally dangerous, if I can say, world, where countries like myself, like ours, feel even more threatened than perhaps some countries which feel they have greater proximity to where the threat is emanating from.
Thank you. If I could just do a quick follow-up. Some people say the world has forgotten about Afghanistan. So, of course, there's a huge humanitarian crisis now. You're very close to this. What would be your message to the international community in terms of what can be done in this humanitarian catastrophe, of course, without supporting the Taliban regime?